Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another webinar from BMSIT in association with WAV. It is a continued series uh, named Insights into European Education and Innovation Ecosystem from Pavan K. Sriram. I guess you already know him from our past webinars. He is the head of international projects, Digital Norway, and co-founder of Kalari Opening Minds. Along with him, we have another special speaker for today. His name is Mirko Varano. He is the chair of EAIE Expert Community, European Collaborative Programs, advisor, advisor for international projects at KTH with a focus on Erasmus Plus, European University Networks, and University Consortia. So let's get started with the webinar.
Thank you very much, Bhageshi, for the introduction. So Mirko, we can begin with your presentation and um, we can get this started. And just some basic things. I think people keep coming and going. So for those of you, feel free to ask questions at any given point of time. So the attendees, feel free. There is no formality that you have to wait until the end. And you have any questions, any queries, please raise this point. And please remember, this is the first time, I think, in India, we're presenting something about European University Initiative. So please pay close attention. And if you have any questions to Mirko, please feel free to ask. Yeah, thanks.
So good morning, everybody. I will now share. You have to enable me to share because I cannot share the screen yet.
Yeah, I think Bhagesh, you also need to make Mirko as a co-host.
Yes, I'm not still allowed to share.
Okay.
Wait, let me check. Now you should be able to do it.
Yes, now I am. Okay, so here should come my presentation. I hope everybody can see it. And can you see it properly?
Yes, Mirko, you just have
yes?
to
Okay.
Full screen mode.
So I will start quickly. We are talking about the European Universities Initiative and the future of education trends in Europe, with a special focus on joint programs and double degrees. So just to start, what is a joint program? Because this is a specific sub-product of the internationalization of higher education in Europe.
Sorry,
and when we talk,
can you just make it full screen, your slides?
On my screen, it looks full screen. I can.
What about others? Can you see full screen? Yeah, now it's okay.
Is it full screen?
Yeah.
Ah, okay, because I see it full screen on my screen. So let me know if something goes wrong. We talk about joint programs in Europe when we talk about an integrated curriculum, which is coordinated and offered jointly by 2 or more universities, and a program that is leading to joint or multiple degrees. So we talk about the program and not the final output, which are the degrees. But this is a very specific European process that started a long time ago in the 90s, but now it's spreading also around the world. We will look more into that in this 20-25 minutes. You should not care about the final output, which are the degrees, but more about the content. So if we look more into detail, as I said, these joint programs or double degrees were developed in the early 90s on a bilateral basis, so on the initiative of 2 universities based on 2 existing programs. There's a main difference between joint program and double degrees, and you might have heard both terms. The main difference is that double degrees is an opportunity that is given to a student from 2 separate existing programs to spend certain period of time at the second university and get also their degree. But this is a limited number of students from the whole program pool of students at each university. The joint programs are completely different because they are developed jointly by 2 or more universities from scratch. So they decide to create a new master program in a specific discipline, putting together their competencies and their strengths. And by doing this, then they create a unique program with joint recruitment, joint marketing, joint management, and so on, joint quality assurance. So everything is coordinated by 2 or more universities in the perspective of the program, not having separate programs that talk to each other. This has been going on until the beginning of the 2000s. This has been an intra-European process, more or less, so to speak. At the beginning of 2000, in 2003, the pilot of something called Erasmus Mundus was introduced. And that was a sort of game changer, because by doing these joint programs had finally funding from the European Union, and they were open to non-European students for applying. So this was completely new. It was more medium long-term perspective, and more universities that before never thought of engaging in this double degree or joint program business started doing it. So the international dimension of joint programs was introduced in the sense that they were used by the European Commission as a way to make European higher education more attractive. This is mainly because, as you know, students come to study in Europe because they want to study in Germany, or they want to study in Sweden or Italy. And they do that. They go for for a degree-seeking master program in one university. This is one thing. But Europe as a whole is not seen as a coherent or homogeneous environment, higher education environment. The European Commission tried through the Bologna process and this initiative of Erasmus Mundus to make it more attractive outside of Europe. So when we look at the recurrent features of Erasmus Mundus joint master degrees, we have this jointness concept. So in all the phases, the 2, 3 or more universities have to work together, finding a common ground to create a coherent and attractive curriculum, to find common management measures and processes. They market the program in itself, not the individual programs at different universities. They deliver the teaching jointly by bringing in the best teachers and researchers from all the universities and so on. So this is something completely new, or it was completely new then. The model is that usually now in Europe, we have the 3+2 system, bachelor and master. So the master programs in most countries are now 2 years duration, or 120 CTS. So now the 1 + 1 year is the most common one, even if there are different structures in place. But what is more important is that there's no extension of the nominal duration. So you enroll in these programs, you know it will be 2 years. While with the double degree programs, since it was a combination of 2 separate programs, sometimes students were asked to study 1 semester more or something like that. Another difference is that more universities were forced to introduce teaching in English to be more attractive, because all these Erasmus Mundus master degrees in place are published in a catalog that is owned by the European Commission, and students from all over the world, they can go in and check what is available. I can also show you there's a website. Of course, if universities from Spain, Germany, and Italy continue to offer their programs in their own languages, it was allowed, but they've realized that they wouldn't have been as attractive. So most of them, they switched to English. There are specific grants available. As I said, this is a big difference from the past when students had to rely on their own money, and especially if they come from specific regions of the world. And another important feature is that degrees are automatically recognized in different countries. So everybody knows it's a brand, it's a label, Erasmus Mundus. After the Bologna process, the master programs in Europe are of equivalent value. So when you get one of these, you have the whole Europe as a potential labor market. And usually you get a unique specialization and graduate profile. So this combination of different competencies from different European universities create professional profiles or profiles of graduates that didn't exist before. So you will also have kind of competitive advantage in the labor market. And what is next after this? After this almost 20 years of activity, things are changing. But before talking about that, I can show you we had a study, a comparative study on joint programs and double degrees. This is just to show you what you can expect as a graduate. For example, we noticed that students who took a joint program or a double degree, more than half of them were leaving after graduation, leaving and working or studying outside of the country of origin, while only 28% of the students with a short mobility period. This gives already an idea of what you can expect. Working in the scope of the graduation, meaning not working at McDonald's, because that's not the point. It's also much higher. Some 8% more of the students claim that they worked with what they were supposed to work. Also about money, this is not something I can promise, but we noticed that students with a joint program, sooner or later, they earn more than students with one degree from their home university. There could be multiple reasons for this, and it's not a rule, but it was interesting to see that non-students did this for money reasons, but most of them ended up being better off than their peers who only had the national degree. And finally, we had many findings and results, but this can be interesting to see what was the perceived benefit or impact of having participated in a joint program from the student's point of view. And here you can see it was multiple choice, but as you can see, or what is interesting, is that students who took a joint program, JP stands for joint program, control group stays for students who only got their national degree. As you can see, in all the values, almost all the values, the students with a joint program valued their experience more than students who stayed at home. What is interesting is that the top ranked elements or alternatives that we gave, they are related more with the experience in itself and with personal development, and lower ranked were the ones related with the academic or professional skills. So students thought that this experience was best when it came to leaving your comfort zone, improving the ability to adapt to new situation, learn new languages, make feel more comfortable in socializing with people, better understanding of other cultures and so on. So with this in mind, you can also decide if this is for you or not. If you just want to become the top-notch technician in a specific field, maybe this will not play that huge role. So this is more about the Erasmus Mundus Joint Master Degrees when it comes to the technicalities, but I go quickly through them because they are not too interesting for you. There should be at least 3 universities to compose such a consortium from 3 different European countries. There are grants for physical mobility, so it means that virtual mobility that is so popular today cannot replace physical mobility, meaning that you have to spend a period of residence, study period in at least 2 different countries. And as I said, there are different models. Sometimes it's 1 semester in 4 different countries. Sometimes it's 1 year plus 1 year only in 2 countries and so on. You apply to the program and not to the university. So you have to look for a program that is relevant for you, regardless of the universities offering it, because sometimes there are 4, 5, 6 universities and you apply to the program and then you are assigned to a couple of them without being able to choose. In some cases you are, because they offer different specializations. It's a very selective process at all levels. I was involved in several, and each of these programs has some 30 positions each year with grants. Of course, anyone can participate, but with grants, and they were receiving some 1,000-2,000 applications. So you have to be ready for a fierce competition. And as I said, all the existing Erasmus Mundus Joint Master Degrees are available at this link, which is owned by the European Commission. If you want later, I can show you, but there you can search by country, university, duration of the program, field of study, and so on. So it's a combined filtering system. To make it more clear, here is an example of one of these Erasmus Mundus joint master degree program called DENSIS that is offered by my university. It means decentralized smart energy system, so it's in the field of energy and technology. As you can see, this is one of the models, but it's not necessarily like this. Actually, it's not. This is a bit more sophisticated than others that are simply 1 year at one university and 1 year at the second university. In this program, there are 4 universities, the University of Lorraine, and that's where all the students that are selected to the program spend the first year, the semester 1 and 2, to get, as you see, the basis, physical principles and so on for renewable energy sources. During that first year, students also spend altogether an intensive week at the University of Liège in Belgium on the artificial intelligence aspects for this field. At the end of the first year, they all move together to a summer school where they learn more about transferable skills like business entrepreneurship, or they get extra technical skills in their area. And so on. After the end of this year, they choose one specialization option. According to that specialization, they will go either to KTH in Stockholm, Sweden, or to the Technical University of Catalonia in Barcelona, Spain, or at the Technical University of Torino in Italy. As you can see here, it's different specializations. So according to this model, students apply to the program, they all stay together for 1 year, they all go to the summer school first year, and then in the second year they split. In the third semester, so first semester of the second year, they split in groups. Then they all reconvene together here in the last semester of the master program for an internship. They reconvene or not, it depends on the models, but these internships are offered by different associate partners of the consortium, so they can be in different countries. And they could be academic or industrial partners. At the end, and here is when students write also their master thesis. At the end of the second year, they all get together again for a second summer school. After all these, they get a double degree issued by the university of the first year. They all get it, University of Lorraine in France, and then they get a second degree from the university they visited in the second year. So this is one of the models. It's more sophisticated than the others, but as you can see, in a period of 2 years, students study in France. They take a summer school in a second university, which is rotating every year. So it will be one of the other universities. They spend the third semester at one of the other partners, and then they have an internship that could be even in a fourth country. And then there's a further summer school where they can also go to a new country. And during the first year, they all go to Belgium together to take this intensive week at the University of Liège. So with this small time investment and grants, quite generous grants, you have an opportunity to see many different European higher education environments. This being said, after all this, there is the future, and this is 2025 for us in Europe, because the European Commission decided that by then we should have the European education area in place. And what is the European education area? It's a situation in which learning and research are without borders in Europe. There are still some barriers in this sense. There's Schengen countries and non-Schengen countries and many other reasons. Now with Corona, we saw it even more. Mobility should be standard practice, so all students active in higher education should go to a second country or more. And this should not be an exception as it is today. And there should be a strong sense of European identity. So they noticed that we are losing a bit momentum with the European Union due to different reasons: economic crisis, Corona, refugee crisis, populism, growing populism. So there will be a lot of focus on this. So expect to be in a very European environment if you move here. There will be 3 key initiatives: European Student Card, European Universities, and mutual recognition of diplomas. I tell you a bit more about the European universities, maybe 5 more minutes because I don't have much time left. But automatic mutual recognition is interesting for you because finally it will be a rule that students who get a degree from one university in one European country should be able to transfer to any other European university going through the same process that the local students go through, without exceptions and without discrimination, because they have a degree from a different country. And the same for study abroad period. If you're allowed to go to second university and you come back, everything you've done there, it will be fully recognized. The European Student Card is related to this. It's finally a document the students will have. It will probably be digital, but students will be able to show online to any university in Europe what their background is without moving papers, going through complicated administrative bureaucratic processes, translations, costly. So it will be automatic. Any university receives your name and they will be able to see what you have done, and they will tell you how they can enroll you and for what, under which circumstances. European University is something completely different. They say it's a game changer. It's a new initiative related to what I said before. The European Union Commission realized that Europe is now facing difficult times. There are growing markets that became also recruiters in Asia, India, China, and many others. So Europe was the main destination for international students and still is, but we are losing a bit ground. So they decided that one of the reasons for this is, again, this fragmentation and these smaller size universities all competing with each other. So they decided to launch this initiative to invite universities from different European countries to get together, but not on just the joint programs or collaboration development or research, but to create a virtual university, putting together the strengths and creating critical mass. So they will be, in perspective, there will be a number of European universities with a specific name that will be composed by different smaller universities from different countries. They just started this process. Everything that I said so far is relevant because, of course, one of the first actions will be to create more joint programs in different combinations, putting together their strengths to be more attractive outside of Europe. So a European university, in brief, is composed by at least 3 European universities from 3 different countries. It is, they have to be from 3 member state or program countries. This is not relevant for you. They receive good funding and more in the coming years. It's a inter-university virtual campus, let's say. So students who enrolled at one university composing this European University Consortia, in principle, they are students at all the other universities. They should have access to all the academic offer, research opportunities, facilities, support centers, and so on, at all the other universities as well. This is the perspective. The work has just started, and I think it will start, first of all, from these joint programs, but then it will escalate until the highest level of integration possible between these members. There will be embedded mobility at all levels. Students registering at one of these universities will have a wide range of opportunities to spend a study period at other universities. So in principle, you can apply for a bachelor program at one university, and then you can apply for a master program at another university of the consortium, and you will be considered as a local student. During your master program, you can take a joint program so that you will even visit a 3rd university. You can apply for a PhD at a different university. You can take summer schools or webinars from the whole consortium. So you will have a good international experience at the end, and you will get something called European degree, even if we don't know what it is, but they are working on it. So in nature, your degree will be European. Now they are studying also the opportunity maybe of giving some formal stamp, European certificate, and so on. So there will be dedicated cooperation structures. You can rely on all these universities. They will support you as one of your students or their students. You will have this European university will have a very shared, integrated, long-term strategic vision. So you will hear about it. Now Erasmus Mundus is more relevant for you because it's already there in place and quite well established. But stay tuned because you will hear more about this. And just to conclude now, because I'm late, I can tell you about some current debate and future scenario that will complete this picture if you decide to move to Europe. There's the new Erasmus Plus under negotiation, so we don't know exactly the contents, but you will have more opportunities in the future as non-European students, that we know for sure. There will be more virtual mobility, so you can also expect more of this virtual component in the joint programs that you will take. Maybe it's good because you will also have the opportunity to study in distance mode at more than 2 universities. There will be more blended mobility options, so shorter stays, and then you keep studying that subject with that teacher when you go back to your home university. More reverse mobility, it means that they realize that it's more sustainable to move one teacher than moving 25 students to the second university. So you can also expect to see more teachers from other universities in the consortium coming and teaching live. They are talking about micro summer schools and seminars, so much smaller activities. I think this is in the after the Corona experience. It's they realize that longer stays might create problems if the hosting university is not resilient enough. Resilience will be very relevant. So when you look for a university, make also sure that they are good at this kind of support in case of crisis. And as I said, also in joint programs, there will be virtual mobility options. And there will be also a lot of more of internationalization of curriculum, meaning that you provide the international perspective within the curriculum without the need for the students to travel to a second university where this topic is treated in a specific way. So more international curricula, just to be short. And as I said, more focus on European added value, European dimension in the face of all this challenging that Europe is living today. And I think this was all I had to say, but of course, I'm open to answer any question.
Hi, thank you so much, Mirko. So maybe any of you have any questions who are attending the presentation now? Anybody wants to ask some questions specifically at this stage to Mirko? I know some of you said that you know about Erasmus Mundus. Some of you said you're considering masters in Europe. So the idea of this presentation was to tell you what's coming forward in the next half a decade already from next year. So we have one Q&A. Mirko, maybe you want to answer this. It's a question from Amulya. She asked, will my application be considered at an European university if I have a break between my studies due to health issues?
You mean once you are in Europe or before? I mean, if in general, there's no discrimination. When it comes to Erasmus Mundus programs, there's no age discrimination or any discrimination of any sort. So it's just about your credentials. If you are on the top of the list, of the short list, due to the criteria, then you will be selected no matter what. Of course, you have to be able to be there when they decide that you have to be there. So usually the application is between October and January for programs that start in August, September of the following year. If you get selected then you have to be there in September, yes. So if you see that something might happen, then it's better to postpone it because you might lose the opportunity. You cannot postpone your stay in this sense, no?
Yeah, but just to add on, Amul, if you think that you're taking a break now between your studies because of health issues, that's no discrimination, as Mirko said, for applying for your studies. So you're definitely eligible. That will never be anything against you.
And if that happens during your stay in Europe, during your 2-year stay, you will keep your status as student. You will still be allowed to graduate, but you just have to keep into consideration that you get this 1,000 euro grant per month, but only for the duration of the program. If you delay the graduation for any reason, then you will have to pay on your own funds to complete it. So they pay for 2-year program.
Yeah. Any other questions? So meanwhile, you're typing your questions. We'll start. I'll just share my screen and then we come back with the Q&A. I have a problem sometimes with Mac and sharing with Zoom. Yeah, it works now this time. Okay. So you guys can see my screen. If so, can you please press yes in the chat? Great. Okay. Before I just go ahead, then another question to you, Mirko, is from Robin, who asked, what are the important points we should keep in mind while applying for application, which will increase his chances of getting selected? Means I'm sure you're from KTH Sweden, you have very many knowledge in this, so that would be great if you could,
Yeah,
respond.
I can share my knowledge, but as I said, all these Erasmus Mundus alliances, they set their own selection criteria. So all that is in common for everybody is that they should not discriminate on any possible basis. But they all choose different criteria. What I've seen is that they usually have, of course, you have to have a bachelor already, or you have to have plans to get a bachelor within the next few months. You have to be proficient in English almost always. They usually don't require any other languages, and you are offered study programs in the other languages on site. But they usually ask for TOEFL or IELTS, and it's also your transcript on record from your bachelor studies. Usually they also, each of them, this is standard, and each of these programs, they have extra requirements. Sometimes it's not requirements, but it's pluses. And this is if you already had some experience abroad, so that they are sure that you can actually make it, even if this is a kind of sort of indirect discrimination, but some of them give priority to students who have already lived away from their mothers. If you have already some experience in companies, but here I'm talking about more engineering programs because these are the ones I'm more in contact with. They value highly if a young student has already taken an internship in some company and so on. Apart from this, there's not usually much. They ask usually for a letter of motivation to decide, to describe why you want to go through this experience. But in my experience, this is something that nobody ever reads, apart from situations in which it's very tight and they have two students that perform exactly at the same level. Then they look at this to see who of them is more motivated. But as I said, it's different from consortium to consortium, but there's nothing more than having a bachelor, having a good graduation score for your bachelor, and having good proficiency of English, which should be the case for most of you. So Indians are usually very successful in applying to Erasmus Mundus master degrees, including Pavan. So we have.
Yeah, we have one more question. I think this also you could take it, Mirko, is from this is from Dr. Prasanna, who asked, kindly highlight job opportunities for engineering college professors. I think there's of course a lot, especially with Marie Curie and the Horizon 2020. Maybe you can give a bit of insights and I can add on here.
Yes, now there are many opportunities, of course, in Europe in general, but we talk about these initiatives. For Erasmus Mundus, I forgot to say, I was addressing only students, but there are also grants. This is not really jobs, but there are grants for shorter stays, 3-4 months, for teachers from non-European countries to go and teach within one of these Erasmus Mundus joint master degrees. So you select, just like a student, the study fields where you're working, and then each of these consortia, they publish a call for teachers to teach for 2, 3, 4 months a course within this program, or to contribute to a course, or to be present, to coach students and so on. So this is an opportunity, and it's also quite good salaries, grants in this case. But there are also other European programs. As Pavan said, Marie Curie, this is more for researchers who want to have an international experience. There are endless type of mobilities, but this is very, very attractive. We don't, as I said, the new Erasmus Plus and the new Horizon Europe, which is the research program, are being now discussed, and approved. So we don't know all the details. Rumors want that they will not change much because they talk about evolution and not revolution. The budget will be higher, so there will be more opportunities, but the details of each of these are not known. So there might be slight changes in the amount of the grants, but the spirit should be the same. So if it's about a short experience, I would recommend Erasmus Mundus, this scholar, I think it's called Scholars Grants. And if it's for more serious and long perspective work opportunities, then I think you should look into the Marie Curie Research Exchanger program that will also be renewed.
Yeah, and also to add to what Mirko said, there is a website called Euraxis. We can send it to WOW and they can publish it in their site. So where you find opportunities for professors or researchers, anywhere from postdoc, even PhD above. So there is a mobility opportunity all across the globe specifically. So you could actually come from anywhere in the world and work in Europe. So there is specifically, this portal is developed by the European Commission for catering academicians at large. So there is, of course, opportunity. One could look from there. And there's always constant publications every day, in fact. Yeah. So it's just like how students are going through the process is the same applicability is for researchers and professors have to go through the same process in getting selected to work in Europe. Yeah. So I have a few more questions as such. Maybe I will try to talk through my presentation, which will also give some insights to Teza and Amulya regarding the volunteering and the work experience. So I myself was a product of this Erasmus Mundus. So I did my Erasmus Mundus Masters between 2008 and 2010. So I'm a mechanical engineer. My undergraduation I did from BMSIT. And after that, I was working for 2 years. Through my work, I went to US for almost 8 months. And then the rest of the time I was in Bangalore. So, and when I came back, that's when I was in the second year of my work, that's when I made an application to this Erasmus Mundus Joint Masters. And the Masters itself was related to computational mechanics. So it's a interdisciplinary course between aerospace, mechanical, and civil engineering. And I did have more closer relation or experience in mechanical, but I had very little exposure to aerospace and civil. So even though I didn't have exact 100% work experience relevant, I did have the foundation and the subjects, which was basics for all these 3 subjects. So in that sense, that counted very much. I was very actively involved in volunteering and extracurricular activities through my school days, through my undergraduation, pre-university. So those things really matter a lot because as Mirko was mentioning before, when you come to Europe, they're also looking for an all-round personality in the sense that are you going to be a good team player? It's not just about your academics, but all the other extracurricular activities really counts because that will help them to gauge who you are as a person as such. So moving to my next slide. So my Erasmus Mundus, this is a picture from Barcelona. So that's how it looked, how planned this particular city is. So my particular master's was run or coordinated by University Politécnica de Catalunya in Spain, in Barcelona. So they were the consortium leaders and they had the website in which we used to make the application. I had a choice to study either in France, UK, or Germany, or even Spain. I choose to apply. My first preference was Spain, and I wanted to graduate in UK. But I could have actually done that same thing with France or from Germany because many of my classmates did that. But now I also see that they have an extra university, which is from China, which is a new addition, which is part of the consortium. I would consider that this particular master course is kind of one of the very few which has few universities, but there are many others have many, many different universities as a part of the consortium as such. So one thing which I felt of starting through this Erasmus Mundus program is, of course, the subject itself is top-notch. Some of the things which you study today in VTU, some of the books which is written by some of the people, you'll find them in these universities. The thing with Europe is that they don't really necessarily promote their universities or market them so much as a UK, Australia or US universities do, because they're not necessarily driven by the factor of trying to make money. So education here is more about really educating and providing knowledge to the citizens rather than trying to make a ripoff of a huge tuition fee. In that sense, the quality of the people who are educating, the quality of the infrastructure, it's still top notch comparable to all these other countries, which is very heavily focused on money driven education system. So in that way, you learn a lot. And of course, being in Europe is also like being in a melting pot of culture. That itself is going to be very exciting for many of you to learn. So just to give you a bit more perspective about what I managed to learn through this is, see, when I came for my master's, I was getting my scholarship, but of course I had some responsibility to clear back home from my parents. So I found internship very quickly. So while I was doing my master's in UK, immediately I found internship. I was doing part-time jobs during summer, during the weekends, which led me to also get some scholarship if I wanted to pursue my post-graduation, but I decided to work rather than that. I was very actively engaged in student organizations and volunteering and all those things. Of course, these are the matters which really helped me to attend the interviews, kind of place myself in a good scenario, which always gave me an opportunity to either work or do whatever studies. And I've been very actively engaged in the Erasmus Mundus Association for the last 10 years. I just finished my presidency last year. It was for 2 years. So you can see that nearly around 25,000 students have been funded since 2004 through this prestigious scholarship. You can compare this almost like Fulbright, or which is from US, or British Sheving from UK. It's very competitive, but it's a life-changing experience if you get it. But even if you don't get the scholarship, studying in Europe gives a very different dimension as such. And so all these things really matter. And now when I'm getting opportunities, I work as a head of international projects in a company here in Norway. And I see these things really matter when they're hiring. They look into all these aspects. So nobody till today, from the day I've graduated in my master's till today, has ever asked me, what's my marks? What's my grade? Every time I've only seen that they try to evaluate your attitude, evaluate your skill sets, evaluate your personality to a larger extent. So probably the memorization, all the thing which we tend to do in our learning doesn't really become important. What I learned, or I had to unlearn a lot of things, what I had learned back in home, is that here teamwork becomes a very, very important aspect. How are you going to do a group project? How are you going to dig in deeper? How are you going to research? How are you going to do a fact-based work? How are you going to produce your own work? What's your thinking about innovation? What's your thinking about the bigger picture of what's your contribution to the society? So it starts really giving you much more deeper questions about why are you even educating yourself? Because growing up, I think for me, probably like many others, coming from a humble background, growing up, the idea was educating to find a job or have a kind of a job which pays off. So that was the thinking. But having this kind of experience and exposure, it gives you a lot of different mindset. It really challenges you in a different level. So for those of you who are considering to either study within India or abroad, try to get out of your comfort zone. Try to either move from the same city to another city or another state or abroad or whatever. Try to decide doing something. And even when you come here to abroad or in any country, try to not be only with your fellow community. It's always important to have a wider perspective. It's good to have your own people, but also try to get exposed to different nationalities and different friends, which really matters a lot. So see, the thing which me being actively involved in these things is that I've been managed to study and live across 6 different countries. I think that gives a very different holistic perspective. To be honest, I never dreamt about this, so it happened. And I've managed to live in 3 different continents, giving a very different perspective. And me, since I've been so actively involved with the European Commission with my work and other things, I've always managed to travel over 40 countries for almost free. I barely paid any money for most of my travels. So that's the kind of thing which you gain, and that's what you kind of learn. And I also have friends today. If I decide to go to any country or any particular city in Europe, or even many of the African countries or America, both North and South, or even some of the South Asian countries, I have friends, so I can easily go and stay with them, or at least I get an opportunity to see the real culture from their eye. So this is something which for me is more precious. Of course, I have a good career, so that's never a question. But I think for me, much more precious in my life is having these kind of things more than just a high-paying job. For me, at least, it doesn't really makes big difference in life. More for me, something which makes more valuable is these kind of life-changing experience. Right now, we also started a new company in June this year. So we're working very much on these aspects, trying to bring more complementarities in our education system, trying to break the typical traditional education what we have, and trying to bring more education related to how can one be transformative in their thinking, and already from a school level, how can we bring these things is what we're trying to do. So with that, I think I can just go back to some Q&A. So Teza, you asked, maybe Mirko, you also want to just join in so that we can, yeah. So there's one question from Teza was that few of the courses require a year of work experience. Is it necessary it should be in a particular field? So when you guys are evaluating a candidate, do you really look for specific work experience, or actually it's pretty okay that you have relevant but not necessarily specific?
No, okay, when it comes to us, because as I said, all the alliances are very different and they have different perspectives. But in our case, we don't expect from a student who has just completed his or her bachelor to have such an advanced experience. As you said, what we look into is more the fact that students put themselves into, questions themselves and went on an internship, no matter almost in which field. Again, it should not be maybe working at McDonald's, but something relevant in general to the broad field. It's very, very appreciated. And as also you said, teamwork, even if you have participated, and there was a question about Rotary voluntary work, that's also appreciated, because that shows that you are a sociable person, you can work with others, you know about this team working, interaction, and so on. So that's highly appreciated, although it's never in the mandatory requirements, or almost never. Also not to discriminate, but it's always there. So I would, when you look for one of these programs, or among all these programs, and you look for a suitable one, I would recommend also to choose those like the one I presented that are more complex. They offer more extracurricular activities that offer you possibilities to go on internships, even if there are no credits attached. So it's because then we got some complaints from students who graduated from other programs, more traditional, like 1-year courses at one university, 1-year courses at the second university. They became very good in their own field, but then when they looked for a job, they realized that they had no clue about the working culture in that country, how to relate to companies, and so on. And they didn't have the skills that companies look for, which are exactly that, like being outspoken, working in teams, taking initiative, and so on. So you should look for programs that offer this kind of soft skills in the program. That's very important. And also another thing that you should keep in mind, this is not something you can read on their pages, but there are very different pedagogical cultures in different countries. So when you enroll in one of these programs, you have to be prepared to change completely your perspective from one year to the next, or if you go to a summer school in a different country, because in some countries in Europe, it's very traditional with one direction teaching, students sitting, listening, and studying by heart. And then you move to a second university. In Sweden, for example, courses start often with project work. And some students from other countries, they get completely puzzled. They got no information, no theory, and they are put in a group and they say, now you work on this simple project. And you can notice that students from some countries, they just sit quiet and scared and they don't know what to do. So it's good if you're selected in one of these, or even before you're selected, if you look more for this information, what will you be expected to do, so that you don't get bad surprises later, then it's too late.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mirko. And I have one question here. Any more questions? So just keep them coming. So one question from Praveen, I think specifically to me, what's the Scullery all about? I can just give a bit more detail because that's not the intention of this presentation, but I'll just try to be brief. So just simple scenario, Praveen. I've had education back in India, like many of you now who are attending this webinar. I've always felt that we are driven by this competition versus, winners versus losers. There's a high pressure on always constantly need to perform. If you end up not going to IITs or IIMs, you already have this kind of, barriers and differential factors, which is very high. I've seen the same thing in US and UK, and we have seen that very much in the job. So it's like a never ending process in which you always have to compete with yourself, with your peers, and even your own family, parents, teachers, everybody tries to affect in one way or the other, whether they have positive effect or negative effect, it has all kinds of it. So our idea is that how can we disrupt this education thinking? How can we disrupt the traditional way of education, probably which was built due to the colonization, where Britishers wanted India to kind of, educate for people to work in industry. But somehow, even though we have close to 1 crore people, like engineers being produced every year, does it really is something valuable? How come we are not focusing on STEAM? Like, why are we only focusing on STEM subjects? Why are we not bringing arts into, why are we not thinking about multidisciplinarity? So this particular startup is very much focusing on developing complementary mentorship, personal growth, personal development program, and also trying to focus on how can parents, teachers, and students think out of the box so that they choose something based on their passion, not because it's based on what the society wants them to do or be. I know it's a very difficult topic, but we feel this is a time for us to, we see all these companies like Byju's, like Unacademy, all these things. Everybody is focusing on just competitive exams or exams and exams. It's just tiring. And when I see a lot of good practices being deployed in many parts of the world, it was more about how can we bring some of the good practices and our own life journeys into practice back home to India to begin with, and try to spread it to countries which really need it. So that's been the main focus of Scullery. Of course, we don't know how successful or whatever it's going to be, but at least it's our way of trying to bring some aspect of transformation and to think differently, because it's enough of just having this mundane, typical way of thinking about education and life. And we want to break kind of stereotypes in the society. So yeah, I hope that helps and answers. Any other questions? You have any few comments, Mirko, to add? Especially now you're kind of you want to just say a few things about EAIE and your role as a chair of the expert committee, because I think many of them don't know what really EAIE does and how important it is to the European higher education, or in general to the world's education agenda. And what's your thought on this?
Yes, so the EIE is the European Association for International Education. It's the largest organization in Europe that deals with internationalization of higher education. All the most important, most experienced practitioners in the field are there. It's a forum. It's organized in expert communities. Each expert community covers one of the specific aspects of internationalization of higher education, and try to support the universities and the practitioners, creating processes, best practices, providing advice and so on. And on the other side, also trying to influence where the European higher education is going to. So talking to the European Commission, being included in working groups for the future programs and so on. And I will be in charge of this new expert community on European collaborative programs, meaning both joint programs at European level and also the future funding program, so Erasmus Plus and the research program. So you get a lot of information there. You have to be a member to get the full information, but this organization is open to everybody. So you don't even have to be affiliated to a university. If you are into this topic, you can go to their website. Maybe it can be shared then on the social media. There you find a lot of insights on these topics that are relevant for you. So opportunities, trends, what you can expect, experiences, studies, and so on. So I would advise you to take a look at that. And then to complete also what Pavan said, it's really more and more important in Europe to have this new perspective on education that is not the traditional one, as I said, on one-way teaching and learning as much as possible. When we had this, we carried out this project to see what is the impact of joint programs on students, we were surprised that many of them, as I said, complained at the end because they realized that they spent 2 years to become very good experts in their field. And then they went to a job interview and they realized that this was basically meaningless because what the employers were looking for was other things like teamwork, having previous experience in companies and so on. So that was a bad surprise. This applies only to certain programs that are still organized in this traditional way, but it's a hint that everybody should now do it, and most of the new Erasmus Mundus joint master degree programs are doing it. They understood. And when we asked the companies, what do you think about a student with a double degree or a joint program? Most of them didn't care. They cared about the skills of the students. Most of them were not aware that students that come from these programs have the skills that they are looking for. So this is a communication problem of universities not talking enough to companies about this. And universities understood, so now they are informing companies more about this because this is relatively new. I mean, for centuries it has been one thing, and now it's only been 15 years with this new concept. They don't care about how many pieces of paper you present, they want to know what you did. And if you choose the right Erasmus Mundus joint master degree, like the one I presented, I don't want to make the promotion now, but with this kind, with many different opportunities, intensive weeks, moving to 3 or 4 different countries, some summer schools and so on, possibilities to get more soft skills, then this is what the companies look for. So look more for the contents than for the country where you would like to spend 1 year because it's warm or cheaper. And also what they offer you concretely. So this was the feedback we got from most of the graduates. Provide more opportunities to the students to get in touch with the labor market and to get extra knowledge that usually students with only 1 degree from 1 university don't get. So that you can clearly see on the presentation of the different programs. It's quite obvious which ones are more ambitious and which ones are more traditional.
Thank you so much. I see that there's Muthu Reddy. I'm just allowing you to talk. Maybe you wanted to say something, Muthu? You had raised your hand, so you want to say something? You want to ask question to Mirko or us?
Or he can just type the question in the Q&A.
I think you're on here. Okay, I don't hear anything. Maybe I can just mute you back. If you have any questions, just write in there. So I think we are just over time. So maybe I leave it to Bhagyashi to conclude and to talk about the next one, and we can finalize.
Yes. So that was a very informative session, which tells a lot about the European universities, their initiatives, and the education trends that emerge in Europe. Surely useful for the students considering Europe for their higher education. Thanks a lot, Pavan and Mirko, for taking out your time. The attendees will be redirected to a feedback page after the session. Please rate this webinar and let us know if you have any suggestions. And the upcoming session, which will be a continuation of this series, will be on 24th of July. So do check out our page for more updates and registrations. So, and an e-certificate will be issued to the attendees who have attended more than 80% of the session. Thank you. Have a nice day. Anybody has any questions? Okay, I think that's it.
Yeah. Thank you so much once again, Bhagyashree, and also thank you, Mirko, for the time and valuable insights. And for all the participants, the next talk will be specifically on breaking the culture barrier while studying in Europe, which I think is very important to know. As much as you want to come and study here, it's important to understand the cultural aspects. So our speaker, Italian again, but she's living in Malta. She will talk about, Viviana, she'll talk about the cultural challenges and how to break those barriers in the next. Thank you so much once again. And thank you, Mirko, for all the insights. Yeah, thank you all.
Very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Bhagyashree. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.